It's just wonderful to be here in Austin, beautiful Austin, on the hottest day of the year. Aren't we also lucky to be in this room? I feel lucky. So I'm Grace from Cisco. I am of Cisco. I am actually from San Francisco. It's all very complicated, but it was always meant to be. Trust me, trust me. So I've had a wonderful career in tech. It's been a long-running career where I started in engineering, went into engineering leadership, and then became a developer, what we used to call developer evangelist at Microsoft. And I've built a practice around developer relations since then. I'm going to dig into my career journey quite a bit more in this talk, but I'm going to put a pause there for a second because I want to talk about something really important. Yes, food. Food, it's all about the food. And I don't know about you guys, but when I'm out working out, playing tennis, doing a hike, I need a carb load. Like I start imagining my bowl of spaghetti, and when I go to a restaurant, this is what I'm expecting, this lovely, beautiful bowl of spaghetti. But sometimes you end up in a place where you end up with this contraption. I don't even know what this is actually called, but some people call it spaghetti. That's all right. And then, I don't know, how anybody play tennis in the room? Anybody? A few hands, good. I grew up playing tennis, didn't do a whole lot of formal training. I grew up aspiring to be great tennis players like Venus and Serena Williams. This is Venus playing at one of her matches many years ago. Beautiful, graceful, powerful players, right? I always had in my head, I want to play just like that. But most of the time, this is me. This is what ends up happening to me, and that's when I'm not also having my magical like hole in my racket that appears and then disappears. You know, I don't know how that works, but sometimes that happens. But you know, you need that preparation. Some of us aren't up for this kind of expectation. So what does this have to do with your careers? Well, many of us grew up being told you're going to pick a career and then you're going to stick to that career. You're going to grow up in that career and your career is going to go up and to the right. You're going to keep like moving up in your career, right? How many of you heard that story or were brought up to believe in that? Yeah, okay, so that's normal, I think, mostly. Except reality for most of us, some of you are lucky. I know if there's some of you in the room like, I'm a rock star. I am up to the right. That's good. Not all of us get that experience. The reality is most of us have this a little bit more meandering in our careers. That's not a bad thing. It's very normal. We have our twists and turns as we're learning about what it is that we really want to do in life, right? You spend a good chunk of your life at work, so it better be something that you love. And today, in today's reality, many of us actually have gaps. And for some of us, that's, oh my God, how do I talk about this gap? That's scary. Should I take the gap? Should I take the time off? It's just like this big question. And yet we shouldn't feel that way. We should feel that freedom to take that gap when we need it. So let's talk about the reasons people have for gaps. Very common. Many of us take time off of work to raise our families, take care of sick ones, right? Many of you have probably experienced this, whether you're a man or a woman. I had a colleague who was telling me stories about how he was the one that stayed home with the kids when they were young. And boy, he got the weirdest looks in the parks from all the other stay-at-home moms because he was the stay-at-home dad. But that's all right? Shouldn't judge that. So people leave home or leave work and they work at home, taking care of their family. And that could be a short period, that could be a long period. And we've all been through this pandemic together. And for many, many reasons, people have taken off from work. Some people from the front lines, can't blame them. Front lines, people are leaving the front lines. Service-oriented work did not want to be in their front lines. And I can completely appreciate that. And there are many other reasons people left work during the pandemic. Volunteerism. Sometimes you just get that calling and you need to meet that calling where it is to take that time off of work and do what you feel in your heart is the right thing. That is a really great reason for that gap. And then I always tell my friends, my family, and my coworkers, you must take care of yourself. Oops, sorry. You must take care of yourself. Mental health, physical health, because you can't do your work. You can't take care of anybody if you're not taking care of yourself. So that is super, super important. So people ought to take some time off. All right, not surprisingly, 2.5 million women, they were leading the charge in the pandemic in the mass exodus and the mass resignation that we've all been experiencing. And that's not too surprising for many of us. Many of us feel, if we are working women, that we have the brunt of the family obligation. Like if you have children or if you have elderly parents, that you have that primary responsibility of care. So you have that, and then suddenly the pandemic has you doing your work at home. You've got kids running around. They don't know how to use Zoom. They don't know how to use their calendars. They've never used email. They're like, Mom, that's a skill. I don't know that. What are you talking about? So, it piles up. So it's no wonder that so many women left during the pandemic. In fact, it was so massive that Biden, during one of his State of the Union addresses, said, we must bring women back. We have to bring women back into the workforce. Change. Change is such a scary thing for most of us human beings, right? It can be a really scary thing. And I talk about change a lot with my colleagues and friends, because the thing about change is you should think about it as an opportunity for a new door, because life is an adventure, right? If things stayed the same, you would not be able to go into that new door of opportunity. So think about it as opportunity. And surprisingly, in some ways, during the pandemic of all things, when some people were like, hiding in their homes and just hunkering down and hoping for the best, some people were courageous, absolutely courageous. 47 million people in America voluntarily left their jobs in 2021. Think about that number, 47 million. That's massive. And you know what? 5 million new businesses were created in 2021, which is a 55% increase over the same time period in 2019. That is remarkable, right? In the middle of a pandemic, when so many of us were so afraid for that next new step, think about the courage that took. So, personal reinvention. This is really about what this talk is about. I have talked to myself about personal reinvention for a very long time. Now, when I talk about this, some people are like, personal reinvention? Oh my God, that sounds like really drastic and scary. What do you mean? So let me give you some examples. Julia Child, anybody recognize his name, recognize his picture? I hope some of you do. Julia Child, famous chef. If you don't have the joy of cooking, you don't know how to cook, go buy this amazing book. It will teach you how to do French cooking in your own home. She was one of the early chef evangelists, I would say. But you know what? Her early career, well into her 40s, she was actually employed in the precursor of the CIA. Okay, she worked in a government institution before she became famous. And then in her 40s, she wrote this book, right, to Joy of Cooking, which became super popular. It became super popular because as she went out to promote it, she had this aha moment of, wow, wait a minute, I could be doing this TV stuff and teaching people through TV how to cook and to enjoy this process of learning how to do French cooking, which in those days where it's like overwhelming, like French cooking, we can't do that, that's too complicated. She made it such that the average American person could actually take a recipe that was a French recipe and do it in their own homes. She was like reinventing in all sorts of different arenas, and that TV personalities, that wasn't a thing. My God, she reinvented herself 3 times in major ways. And when she did this TV personality thing, she was 50. At 50, many of us are starting to think about retirement, right? 50. She reinvented herself and created a new career for herself at 50. I have a colleague, so speaking of chefs, he started his career as a chef and then went into home construction. Yes, from chef to home construction, then became a technical trainer on an online platform, and then became one of our wonderful advocates at MongoDB, and he's now joined us at Cisco as our communications expert. So huge leaps and transitions in his career. So I'm giving you these examples because now I'm going to talk about my crazy career journey. And I want you to know that this is not uncommon. So for those of you who are still kind of like thinking about changes, thinking about the next new opportunity, taking that next risk, I want you to just hear the possibilities. Now you saw that picture, that straight line in my career where I went to some name brand companies. it seemed like a perfect career. It went smoothly. That is not the case. This is the reality of what my career was truly like. And this is more the simplified version of this meandering of my career. Those dots on Microsoft, I took time off of work to raise my kids. Now, I took short durations. I did a 12-week stint with my first one because I thought, oh my God, 12 weeks, what in the heck am I going to do with 12 weeks? I've barely even taken 2 weeks for vacation. That's too much time. Oh my God, that first child taught me that was not enough time. So my second child, I had 6 months. I got smarter by then. But I wish I'd talked to someone who'd had a child before me so that I knew and could reframe it into 6 months. But, lessons learned. So I've had, this career, major companies. Let me dig into the details of what this actually really looked like. This mapping over the names of the companies, I actually, first and foremost, I left home when I was 17. I accelerated my high school experience into 3.5 years so I could leave my very difficult situation at home. And I spent 10 years working full-time and working through my college degree off and on through that 10-year period. 10 years. And in that period, I was very fortunate that I landed at IBM, and I landed in a tech support role, and I was in that tech support role for all of 3 months. Now, back then, they made you make a commitment that you were going to do that role for a full year. They made an exception for me because this unusual role opened up to be an application developer, and you needed to know Lotus script. I was the one and only candidate that could apply because in between my support calls, I had taught myself Lotus script and JavaScript and HTML, which back then was super, super new and nascent. Nobody knew any of these things. So I was able to apply for this role and become an engineer, and that was the trigger for the rest of my career in engineering. Now you see this lovely, I went up into engineering and engineering management. The reality was, I decided at some point that management wasn't for me at that time. So I took the step down and went, you know what, I've been doing engineering for a while, did my startup circuit. I want to go see the world. I want to talk to human beings and not just code on my computer all day. I want a different experience now. So I took probably the biggest leap in my career from being an engineer to being a sales engineer. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with this career path, sales engineers are the technical people that the salesperson drags along to show you how those bits work, right, or the hardware works. I was one of those people. And when I started in that role, I have to say, I was absolutely terrified. At every survey about people's fears, what's number one on those fears? Public speaking, right? And so my very first big demo had about 30 people in this government office. I swear to God, I was physically shaking, my voice was shaking, and I actually managed to get through the entire presentation and demo shaking like that. And the biggest lesson that I learned in that was human empathy. Every single person in that room stayed in the room, looked at me with empathy, asked me questions politely afterwards, congratulated me for doing the presentation. And I thought, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to do this again. And so there I went. I continued to do that. And with every presentation, you improve. And so you see, these are some of the lessons that I learned. I will say the funny thing was when I landed at Microsoft as a developer evangelist, I thought, oh my God, I've made it in my career. This is it. No, that wasn't it. I kept growing and learning, taking on more roles and opportunities and challenges. And this is the thing about change. Like I talked about earlier, it's an opportunity to continue to learn, to grow, to take on new and adventurous opportunities. I have not regretted any one of these things, even that day that I was shaking like a leaf, and every day after that for probably 2 years, I was saying to my husband, oh my God, what if it happens again? What if it happens again? He still hears this from me sometimes, but it's okay, we've survived. So I would encourage you, really think about exploring what it is you truly want to do. If the pandemic has taught you nothing more than that time that it gave you, that precious time that it gave you to think and assess, what do you really, really want to do with your life? Think about that opportunity. You're not locked in. Sometimes you get this feeling of, well, I've been in this job for a long time. This is all I can do. I have to do the up and the right thing. That's what I'm supposed to do. I would challenge you to rethink that. You got this precious life ahead of you. Take it as an adventure and think about really what you want to do with that. So this went the wrong way. Remember this phrase. Embrace the discomfort of being uncomfortable. Because when you're uncomfortable, it is simply a reminder that you are learning. You are learning and you are growing. So when I was shaking like a leaf, that was super uncomfortable, and it's not a forever thing. The more you do it, the better you get. Now, for me, way back when I would go and learn something, I would go to Fry's Electronics. You know how sad it was to hear that they were closing every single store last year? This was my place. In Silicon Valley, I would go to one of the Fry's Electronics and I would buy these ginormous books, JavaScript, HTML, Java, all the books, piles and piles of books. And we went, some of you may not understand this term, we had shrink-wrapped software back in those days. So I had a lot of that as well. But you know what? We are so fortunate. There's the cloud. There's all sorts of free stuff in the cloud, like training, like on developer.cisco.com. Because guess what? In networking and infrastructure, there are a lot of people who learned to do a lot of hands-on hardware, but the pandemic accelerated the need to automate. And automation requires some level of programming skills. So we teach basic Python, we teach you the value of how you do automation. And so there's lots of skill setting there and is available for free. And there are so many sites like this, so I encourage you to explore those things. And taking on the Agile mindset. We apply Agile to all of our work, right? Apply it to yourself and your careers and how you're managing your career. Do a retrospective on where you're at right now. Is that really what you want? Where can you improve? What do you need to learn? Where do you want to go? And for those of you who have taken the gap, you need to think about framing up your fears. And these are some common fears that we expect to happen for people who've been out of work, particularly for a long time. First and foremost, around judgment. People feel this fear around being judged. Whether you're leaving work, in my case, I was leaving work to take time off for my kids, and I was being judged as well, what do you mean you're coming back? You're supposed to leave. You're supposed to quit your job. You're gonna stay home. And the irony of that was I met all these other mothers who were 5 years out of work trying to come back, and they were being judged on the opposite end, which was, but you've been gone for 5 years. Why are you coming back to work? Who makes up these rules? It's kind of silly. And then there's always when you're shifting roles, or even coming back to a role you haven't been into for a long time, that fear of making mistakes, right? But making mistakes is all part of learning. And then being different, that feeling of being different, you know what? Celebrate that difference because that is what makes teams stronger, right? We should always include everyone on the team because that differentiation is what makes us think better. So reset those expectations from judgment to support. Making mistakes should be about mentorship. Being different is about acceptance. And you should expect that when you're coming back to work. And as an example, Cisco actually partners with Women Back to Work, and we have a returnship program that is specifically around this, and that is what you can expect from that kind of program. And there are many other returnship programs in tech just like this. And just remember, the world is your oyster. In tech, it's an employee's job market. There are so many openings, and they're continuing to rapidly grow. So remember that when you're thinking about the possibility that you're stuck, you're not stuck. There is so much more to do in tech, so many possibilities. And Cisco, for the second year in a row, we topped Fortune's 25th annual Great Place to Work, and there's a reason for that. We're all about the people. People is what makes Cisco great. And we have this phrase at Cisco, which is one company, many careers. And I've met so many Cisconians who have been at the company for 20, 25 years. There is a lot of solid truth to that. So I encourage you to explore those opportunities. We have thousands of openings globally. But regardless of what it is you decide to do next, really take the time, be agile in your thinking. Embrace the discomfort of learning. It's such an opportunity. It's an opportunity, right? Whatever you do, Find that fit, make your mark in the world. Thank you.